Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Well, we're back with our Evil Elite series after a couple of weeks. Hope you guys did have a good Easter break if you are celebrating. And the Great Awakening continues. The corruption is being exposed by the alternate media and independent news networks. So we've got so much to dive into today. Let's get straight into it. But I thought this one was great. This is the Preventing Elected Leaders from Owning Securities and Investments. So the Pelosi Act. We all know Nancy Pelosi is one of the worst for insider trading. So I'll be keen to follow that one along. But let's get into some Aussie politics here, where Tucker went on an amazing rant. And as I've been saying for a while now, Australia is really the test bed for rolling out this New World Order globalist agenda of total technocracy and surveillance control. So it was good to see him have a rant, and he mentioned, as I've said before, that I think Senator Rennick, out of everyone, is probably our best hope. That appears to be calling out all the BS and actually has Australians' best interests at heart. So good to see, once again, all this coming out from the top podcasts in the world where people now get their information. Now, yesterday was 29 years since Port Arthur, and this one did the rounds a little bit on Twitter yesterday, but I wanted to mention the WASP files. So this is by journalist Paul Motor, and he's done more than a dozen episodes, putting out an episode every week now. And this has just been a fantastic series, digging deep into all the inconsistencies around this story. So this is another thing that I hope we eventually get the truth on, but keep following Paul's series if you haven't seen it. But really sad to see, last week, the passing of Virginia DuFray, who was the lead victim or witness, and really testifying against and calling out the Epstein network, Prince Andrew, and all that dark stuff that's happening in relation to child trafficking and that type of thing. So if you remember, she was hit by a bus and hospitalized, and then she recovered. And does anyone really believe that she committed suicide a week later, when she'd publicly made it clear that she wasn't suicidal and she wants to see all these evil people go down? And now we've got other Epstein survivors coming forward and saying they're really scared for their life. So, maybe she has gone into witness protection and this is all part of a bit of a playbook. I'm not sure, but either way, I really hope these people are protected until we get the Epstein list and all the truth comes out about this. Because as I've said, this is just the tip of the iceberg to exposing all the corruption of the Clintons and all the politicians, Hollywood, and all that type of thing. So this is a tweet from Alex Jones talking about Epstein's Ranch, where young girls and that were flown in. But a lot of people don't know, and I've spoken about this in previous episodes, that he actually had underground facilities, think of them as baby-making factories, where women were being locked up and, impregnated and all this type of thing, which is just crazy. And for a lot of people, this is too much to even believe this is real, but this is finally getting out there. We're getting more and more evidence. Obama and these politicians with all these leaked emails that were leaked by Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, well, with all these crazy expenses and using code words that pedophiles use and that type of thing to bring in young children to certain events, and just the extraordinary amount of money they were paying for these things that, all these inconsistencies. But this is what really got Seth Rich killed by the Clintons in the end as well, where he was the IT staffer that came across all these emails and then shared them. Well, many people assume that it was him that shared them, and he spoke out about all this to WikiLeaks. So once again, Ian Carroll, it's become a big voice on X and the alternate media space. Good to see him calling this out. And this is all part of this, this satanic ritual that these elites, they love. They worship this darkness, this sick stuff that they believe is going to bring them, wealth and money, greed, all this type of thing. And so this is a good thread, just all about the rituals of symbolism hidden in plain sight. And once you're awake to all this stuff, you really can't unsee all the sick stuff that the elites are up to. This is good news here. Terrence Howard talking about how he's going to be calling this all out in a new podcast. I'm sure this is going to get plenty of views, and he's been doing the rounds on some of the other big podcasts like Patrick Bet-David's podcast talking about this stuff. So it is getting out there. And as I said, it's not just the politicians and, celebrities, Hollywood, that type of thing. It's these big hard hitters in industry as well. So this is the CEO of an Israeli cyber company that's been arrested on suspicion of committing these crazy crimes against these really, really young kids. And as we go deeper down the rabbit hole in this series, we'll get into more about why they are doing this and what are their belief systems in the darkness and the occult with the things that they do believe. And this all ties into the Vatican as well, which we're going to see more secrets come out about. We know that there's just a dark history there in terms of child exploitation, the catacombs beneath the Vatican and some of the stuff that's there, as well as a lot of, popes over the years being done as pedos. So I mentioned a few weeks ago that I thought Pope Francis was probably already dead and they would wait till a symbolic holiday to announce it, and they announced it on Easter Sunday. So this was Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigino, who's also been talking about this since back in February. A lot of the US aid funding that's gone towards all this child trafficking and sick stuff that the Vatican is involved in. So yeah, let's hope that more and more of this stuff does come out. But this is a rabbi who's currently being sued for extortion and blackmail. We know that this is, Israel and the elite's playbook, pushing for the next cardinal to be recognized Israel as the inheritance of the Jews. So again, this all gets into the deep religious stuff. The foundation of Israel by the Rothschilds and all the royals and the banking families. That was kind of the plan for World War I and II, and they've got their way, and now Israel looks to expand their power in the Middle East. And we're going to get into some of the stuff they look to be dragging us into World War III as well in this episode. But moving on. So this was a great episode with Tucker and Catherine Austin Fitz, who's been a truth seeker and freedom lover for many, many years now, and they got into so many good topics with a lot of the stuff that's going on in the US in the shadows. But this missing $21 trillion of the Pentagon budget and these deep underground military bases is really interesting, talking about how there's probably even more than this 170 figure all around the world in different continents, and they actually have these deep underground transportation networks as well. So Tucker confirms that he knew a contractor that worked on this. Phil Schneider was probably one of the most famous whistleblowers that got killed 2 months after he did a really popular speech at the time, talking about how he worked on those and some of the things that they came across. So this is all stuff that people just wouldn't have been able to comprehend 5 years ago. And once again, it's coming out in terms of energy weapons. And this is a top US neuroscientist and military advisor confirming the reports that they've been used on US soil. The different types of energy weapons, HARP, all this type of thing that's been conspiracy over the years. It's finally coming out that these technologies do exist. Not only that, we've got the director of the White House Office of Science and Technology stating that the US government has technology capable of manipulating time and space. So it's just wild to be reading these headlines coming out from verified officials with some of the stuff that's going on. And this ties into MH370 and not just this missing aircraft that's probably the most famous case, but there are multiple instances of this. Some of them also with very similar footage. I'll just play a little quick clip shortly here with these 3 orbs. You can see on the FLIR radar and the satellite view here, the orbs circling the plane, MH370, before it just, blips and vanishes from existence. So, this is stuff that's just so far, technology so far beyond what's revealed to the public. It's crazy. We just really don't know what's going on. Okay, so Tulsi Gabbard has made another bombshell move, releasing 10,000 documents in relation to the assassination of RFK. So we got all the JFK docs, and that showed that there was, likely multiple shooters, Israel's involvement, as well as the CIA and Mossad, that type of thing. So good to see more and more docs coming out, but we really do need, the Epstein list. And I think the other one that's probably likely to come next I've spoken about is the 9/11 files. And this type kind of coincides with what I think we're witnessing with this playbook of dripping this information out. It gets fed through, X and these other chat sites, but then through the largest podcasts and, TikTok influencers, Instagram, all that type of thing. So this is Senator Ron Johnson talking about how 9/11 may have been an inside job. Anyone that's spent 5 minutes looking into this and the dozens of billion documentaries knows it absolutely was. And we've also got Tucker and Congressman Kurt Walden talking about this as well. So once again, a lot of people not even aware that Building 7, a third building, fell on that day that wasn't even hit by a plane or anything. So many anomalies. We won't go through all those today, but check out those docos if you haven't already. Another whistleblower coming forward revealing the politicians and insiders that were responsible for the execution of SEAL Team 6. This is all got to do with Osama bin Laden and whether or not he was actually found alive and all that story there, the cover up, the real reasons why we went to the war in the Middle East all those years ago for, the weapons of mass destruction that were never there, all that type of thing where it's problem, reaction, solution. But that problem was always a false flag initially and paves the way to take away more of your freedoms. Okay, so Candace Owens here calling out Matt Walsh and talking about how so much of what NASA puts out there in these space missions are just fakery. And if you don't know the history behind who set up NASA and the Apollo programs, even the NASA logo with the snake's tongue as the T's is, Satan rearranged with their letters. But this was all set up by, some of these crazy Nazi experimenters and scientists that were shipped to America after World War II, all part of this sort of Zionist movement, which is now controlling every aspect of our lives. So, yeah, I'm sure some of the space stuff might be real, but there's so much of it that is provably fake in clips I've shown you before. And again, dozens of good documentaries about this. But the one that was trending the past couple of weeks was this Katy Perry and these 5 girls that just got thumped on the ground here. It's just so hard to believe that they would even insurance-wise let this happen with, girls with thin frames or whatever. Isn't there a huge risk of someone, injuring themselves badly? And not only that, we also saw the clips where they opened the hatch before Jeff Bezos had the tool there to look to open it, the hatch opening inwards. Again, all these anomalies. Remember we had the other hatch dropped back to space a few months ago, and we had all these dolphins rock up, and again the CGI of the sky, it all just looks so surreal. So I'm not sure what this push is with all these things, but highly unlikely that Katy Perry and her friends went to space without helmets in these thin material suits, and just all the things about this that just don't add up. Okay, so one of the top stories obviously breaking in the last 24 hours is these blackouts across Europe. So several countries have been affected, widespread blackouts, but it was only seconds away from a continent-wide blackout with the way that these, these backups and these cutouts and whatnot work here with the power. But what's interesting here is it was only about a month ago when the EU put out these preparedness for multiple day blackouts and telling people to get food, water, maybe gas stoves to cook on and all this type of thing. So is this another just coincidence? Does it remind you of when we had Event 201 about the COVID pandemic just months before the COVID pandemic happened? This is all part of the satanic playbook where they have to show you what they're going to do. And this gets into the arguments of free will and deception in the occult, which we'll get into in future episodes. But this is the playbook. And, just over a week ago, Spain had their first weekday with 100% use of renewables, which is fine. But we know that renewables are less reliant for these grids, particularly in these blackout scenarios. And is it any coincidence that Spain is hit by this outage after cancelling an arms deal to Israel recently? It always seems to be a connection if you dig deep enough. Now, in relation to all this, I want to mention that Trump seems to have changed his tune. A lot of people were pretty angry how it seemed to be. He seemed to be so pro-Israel and under their thumb, but he's changed his tune just in the past week or so, talking about how he's been calling off some of these strikes that Israel wanted to do on Iranian nuclear sites. Remember, this is all part of the greater Israel plan in the Middle East, is to drag Iran into World War III because they'll be backed by, Russia and probably China. And then America and all the Western allies, Europe, will come in, and this will be how World War III starts. Okay, so it is good to see Trump pushing back, if this is all true, because nobody wants to see World War III and nukes drop. So if it's anything to go by, we should be careful and watch out for a false flag incoming, because if you do go against what Israel, Netanyahu, Mossad, and these elites want, they normally get pretty cranky and things don't go well. So I'll be watching that closely. All right, let's get into some of this stuff going on with climate change and the weather, where Bill Gates has been saying that, planting trees to deal with carbon dioxide is ridiculous, when we all know that trees are literally, and plants, the perfect biological machines that turn carbon dioxide into breathable oxygen. And if you actually look into the science, there's been plenty of times throughout history where there was more carbon dioxide and greener trees, and nature always finds a balance to restore it. So as I've said before, the real problem is pollution and all the crap we're putting in the environment, heavy metals, pesticides, all that type of thing. So yeah, I'm all for cleaner, freer energy, but some of these ideas are really just being pushed out to get the fear going and roll people into this carbon credit digital ID system. That's really the agenda. If you think that these people really care about the planet, I think you're kidding yourself. Okay, so this is another Bill Gates involvement here. This company that is using chemicals to block out the sun has been given approval and is going to start within weeks in the UK. So vitamin D deficiency is already widespread. There's plenty of people that work in office buildings and don't get any sunlight on their skin now, along with the, I've spoken about how the fear campaigns around sunscreen and, went too far. And now people are afraid to get sun on their skin, which, all living things did just fine for millions of years without cancer or anything like that. So everything in moderation, obviously. But this is all part of the war on our immune systems as well. So really important to understand that fat-soluble vitamins are so important. As I've spoken about, this push to get rid of meats and eggs and all these type of things that have these fat-soluble vitamins that our immune systems and really our entire body needs to function correctly. So they want to get everyone sick, dumbed down, kept in the dark about what's really going on. This is how they maintain more power and control. So for those of you that still don't believe in weather manipulation and cloud seeding, I've covered how there's dozens of US states that have now banned this practice, and we've seen the legislation to back that up. So it's a very real phenomenon. But this is actually from 2016 on Australian news. I remember this in Tassie when we had the worst floods in 40 years, and a lot of people in the Hydro Tasmania questioned over why they were doing cloud seeding shortly before the worst floods that we'd had down here in 40 years. So it is happening all over the world. Okay, so let's get into the World Economic Forum, which is, again, one of these NGOs, which is a pillar of rolling out this globalist New World Order agenda. But they're now talking about the control of data might enable the human elites to do something even more radical than just build digital dictatorships. They want to start hacking organisms, and this all gets into mRNA. They view our body and our DNA as software, which they can hijack and upgrade and turn off our immune system and all this type of thing. So science is replacing evolution by natural selection. They want to play God. They don't believe that nature's just fine, you're just fine the way you are. They want to continually tweak you and have more control over you and whatnot. So this all ties in with Klaus Schwab stepping down finally, and we got this new guy that's coming in who's the former CEO of Nestle, stating that humans have no right to access free water. So, once again, looks like a criminal out of a sci-fi or something crazy. Don't know where they find these people time and time again to push out this evil agenda. So let's watch. Australia is certainly one of those places where farmers and a lot of people have suffered because of the commoditization of water and privatization of water to foreign interests. So another trend that is going to continue unless we wake people up. And if you're not awake yet, this is absolutely true. There's plenty of good things happening, but we really need this information to get out there. And maybe it's never going to come from the mainstream. This is kind of why I'm doing these episodes, because we're still getting, all this digital ID, all these crazy laws against free speech, a lot of money that's unaccounted for, genocides in the Middle East and other places around the world, and just all our politicians that seem to be owned and blackmailed by Israel as well, rather than making America and the West and all these countries that are captured by the cabal great again. So I'm hoping that changes, but it's only going to come if we wake people up on the individual level. So next up, I want to talk about, this digital ID and brain chips and implants. It all ties together with this system of control and technocracy. But this is the new blindsight brain chip that they want to have in patients by late 2025. And if this doesn't scare you and look like something straight out of a Black Mirror episode, I don't know what does. But we had Elon's third patient successfully implanted with this chip. So he was actually able to type out a post on X just using his thoughts. So we're now at the point where these brain chips can read your thoughts, and then you can use Grok to voice, AI to voice technology. This is where this technology is already at, guys. I think China have also implanted 3 citizens. Now, obviously, if we're helping people that are disabled or have these different, severe and chronic diseases, I think that is probably a good thing. But the fear, as always, is this is how it starts. Just like nobody was, forced to get that experimental gene therapy. You won't be able to buy groceries, pay your rent, catch public transport, whatever it is, unless you have these chips. And this is all part of that Agenda 2030 that they want to push towards. And in some aspects, it feels like more people are waking up than ever. Other aspects, it feels like they're trying to accelerate that rollout to 2030 before too many people wake up. But some more positives here. Artificial dyes being banned. So this is coming into effect 2 years from now, but we've already seen some companies make these changes already, which is great. And just the awareness of this and giving companies 2 years, you can argue maybe that's a bit too long, but again, a step in the right direction. We've got Joe Rogan and Gary Brecker talking about cholesterol and all these biohacking things with 40 million Americans taking statins. And as I've spoken about, if you've been down this rabbit hole, this whole war on fat, which is, again, cholesterol and fat from animal sources have been in nature for thousands of years, millions of years. And there's plenty of populations like Eskimos and Inuits that live off high fat diets that are perfectly healthy. They don't have heart disease, high blood pressure, cholesterol issues. Okay, so this was all part of the sugar industry. Now refined carbohydrates as well, and trans fats, things that come from factories and machines, seed oils, these things that aren't natural. So it's pretty simple, guys. Eat things that come from nature. Don't overcomplicate your health. So Bayer warns that it may have to halt glyphosate production amid thousands of lawsuits and 10 billion in compensation payouts. So similar lawsuits popping up in other countries. Europe banned a lot of these pesticides and herbicides that are still used in the US that are known to cause cancer, known to affect hormone levels, all these things that I've covered in previous episodes. So another positive there. And obviously, RFK Jr. was out talking about the latest autism statistics, particularly in California, where it's now 1 in 12.5 boys have autism, and they have the highest vaccination rates there. So again, hopefully he's setting the scene, and we need more evidence as always. We know that less than 1% of vaccine injuries actually get reported. And so we're going to have more studies, hopefully, shedding light on all of this, and we're going to get unbiased data that isn't captured by Big Pharma. And hopefully we're going to get to the truth, and there's going to be a happier, healthier world once we do so. Last one I wanted to throw in there for all you psychedelic lovers, some more good DMT research about the sustained antidepressant effects in this DMT trial study. And I am having a guest on soon who's an expert in DMT and autism connection, people that are really struggling with psychosis, and could that actually be a result of higher levels of DMT in the brain with people possibly being stuck in trips that are experiencing some level of psychosis and that type of thing because they're missing enzymes in their body. So I'm looking forward to that podcast episode. I hope you guys are enjoying this series. Smash that like button, share these videos around, and I'll talk to you all again soon. Cheers.